I've recently gone down a whole hole of female killers, so get ready for that. Today we're going to be talking about Judy Buenoano, which I will get into her last name later. I'm mostly just going to be calling her Judy. Her name is actually Judias, but I don't feel confident that I'm saying that correctly, so I'm going to stick with Judy. That's mostly what she was known as anyway. Anyway, so today we're talking about Judy Buenoano. Judias Wetley was born in 1943 in Texas. She was the third of four children. I'm not sure what her mother's name was, or even I'm not sure what either of her parents' names were. Her mom died when she was around two, of tuberculosis, so she didn't really know her mom either. And at that point, Judy and her younger brother Robert moved in with their grandparents, and the two older children were given up for adoption. And Judy and Robert lived with their grandparents until their father got remarried. And when that happened, they moved to New Mexico to live with him and his new wife. And unfortunately, this was a very bad situation. Judy says that they were worked as slaves and that they were starved and abused. I do feel like I should point out that nobody actually has proven that. No one is left to tell that tale other than Judy by the time that she was telling it. So it has not actually been proven, but that's what she says, and I don't want to question a victim. I just feel like that's important to note. Anyway, one day in 1957, when Judy was 14 years old, she just snapped. She was tired of the abuse and of her situation, and she attacked several members of her family. She had two stepbrothers that she scalded with hot grease, and then she just physically attacked her parents. And because of this incident, Judy was put in jail, which I thought was insane. She was 14 years old and she was put in adult jail for assault. But she was sentenced to 60 days. And at the end of her sentence, she met in front of a judge again, and she asked if she could be put in reform school instead of being sent home because she didn't want to have to go back there. And the judge did approve of that, so she attended Foothills High until she graduated, and she stayed there. She never went back home again. Now, Judy liked to go by different names. She had several aliases, and she also did legally change her name. I don't know how many times. I don't know if she was just going by different names some of the times, and sometimes she changed it. But anyway, in 1960, she was going by the name Anna Schultz, and she was working as a nurse's aide. And then in 1961, she gave birth to her first son. His name was Michael Schultz, and nobody really knows who the father is. Where she was living at the time was near an Air Force base, and so people have speculated that it was someone from there, but we don't really know. I think it's thought that because in 1962, she did marry an Air Force officer. His name was James Goodyear. In 1966, Judy gave birth to their child, James Goodyear Jr., and at this point, James Sr. decided to adopt Michael, her first son, so he became Michael Goodyear, and she was Judy Goodyear at this point. And then the next year, in 1967, she gave birth to their daughter, Kimberly. And at this point, the family was living in Florida, and James was actually sent to Vietnam, so he was serving in Vietnam, and Judy was at home with the kids for a long time. And during this time, she was actually running a child care center, which after everything is kind of scary to think about. But she ran a child care center. It was called Conway Acres in Orlando, Florida, while James Sr. was in Vietnam until 1971 when he returned home. And he was not home for very long. It was about 3 months before he was admitted to the U.S. Navy Hospital in Orlando with mysterious symptoms. Nobody could really explain why. He was just really sick all of a sudden, just ill. And on September 15th of 1971, James Goodyear Sr. died in the Naval Hospital in Orlando, Florida, from unexplainable sickness. They didn't really know what. And just 5 days later, Judy cashed in on 3 separate life insurance policies that she had taken out on her husband. And then, crazy enough, just horrible luck this woman has, later that year, her house burned down. Can you believe that? And Judy, luckily, was insured for that too, so she collected on her her house insurance and moved her whole family to Pensacola, Florida. And that was in 1972 that they moved. So the family is living in Pensacola, Florida, and Judy meets a man named Bobby Joe Morris. And eventually in 1973, Judy and her 3 children move in with Bobby Joe Morris in Florida. And at this point, Michael, her first son, is 12 years old, and he starts getting into trouble in school and just misbehaving and being kind of an issue. So in 1974, Judy put him into foster care, where he would also get psychiatric treatment. 3 years later, in 1977, Bobby Joe Morris moved to Colorado. And while he was living in Colorado and Judy and her family were still living, well, her 2 children were still living in Florida, you'll never believe it, her house burned down again. So luckily, she was insured again. So she did collect her her insurance from her house fire. And then she went and took her son Michael out of foster care, and she moved herself and all 3 of her children to Colorado to live with Bobby Joe Morris. And at this point, she legally changed her name to Judy Morris. I don't think they were actually married, but I know that her legal name at this point was Judy Morris. After about a year of Judy and her family living in Colorado with Bobby Joe Morris, he was admitted to the hospital with unexplainable symptoms. He was just suddenly very ill, and they didn't really know why. He stayed there for 17 days, and he did recover and was sent home. But then, 2 days after being sent home, he collapsed at the dinner table and was rushed back to the hospital, where he did die 5 days later. And he officially died of cardiac arrest / something that I can't pronounce, so I'm just going to put it right here. Sorry. And luckily, Judy was taken care of. She had taken precautions and had another 3 life insurance policies taken out on Bobby Joe Morris, and she was able to collect those and move her family back to Pensacola, Florida. At this point, Judy and all of her children changed their last name to Buenoano, which is what I said in the beginning was her last name. And it's Goodyear in Spanish, which Judy said is a tribute to both her first husband and her mother. But her mother was not Hispanic, so nobody's really sure why she chose that, really. But it is the Spanish version of Goodyear. And she and all of her children changed their last name to this in 1978 while living in Florida. And also at this time, Michael, her oldest son, dropped out of high school and joined the Army. There was a little gap between the time that Michael dropped out of high school and the time that he joined the Army. And during that time, he moved out, so he was not living with his mother. But then he joined the Army, and he was assigned to do his basic training at Fort Benning in Georgia. So he decided to go home and visit his mom and then go from there to his training. And when he reported to his training in Georgia, he was extremely ill when he showed up, and he was immediately taken to the doctors on base, who found 7 times the normal amount of arsenic in his system. And because of this, he lost the use of his hands and also his legs after about 6 weeks of being in the hospital. And eventually he was given leg braces and also some sort of prosthetic device for his arm. And he was released from the hospital and from the Army and sent back home. And all of his gear together, the medical gear that he had to wear, weighed about 60 pounds, which is important to note for later. So in 1980, at some point, Judy and her 2 sons, James and Michael, decide to go for a canoeing trip. And during their trip, their canoe flipped over, and James and Judy were able to swim to the shore safely, but unfortunately, because of all of his extra gear, he sunk to the bottom and drowned. And local police ruled this as an accident, just a very unfortunate accident, and left it at that. But the Army police, who looked into it because Michael was very recently part of the Army, they were not exactly convinced. So it just kind of stayed on their radar at that point. And soon after that, Judy collected the Army life insurance that Michael had, but she also collected 2 separate life insurances that she had taken out on her son Michael. So again, 3. She always gets 3. Anyway, she collected these life insurances, and she opened a beauty parlor in Florida. And also around this time, she started dating a man named John Gentry, who she had convinced that she had a PhD in both biochemistry and psychology from the University of Alabama, and that she had done a tour of duty as a nurse. None of which is true, but she had him convinced of this. Shortly after starting to date Judy, John Gentry starts taking vitamins that Judy has prescribed to him. Since she has all of this medical knowledge, he trusts her, and he starts taking these vitamins. And he said that they made him kind of sick and a little dizzy, but he just ignored that and kept taking them because Judy knew what she was talking about and she was trying to help him. But about 2 months in, he was hospitalized because he became very sick. And while he was there, the doctors informed him that the vitamins he was taking had absolutely no medicinal value or value whatsoever, and he probably should stop taking them. So he did, and he was in the hospital for 12 days before he fully recovered and was sent home, and he stopped taking the vitamins altogether. And then, about 6 months later, John Gentry gets in his car. He's about to go to the liquor store, I think. Anyway, he gets in his car and turns the ignition, and it blows up. There was a car bomb. I hate saying a car bomb in his car. There was a car bomb. I don't know. Anyway, his car exploded. And luckily, John did survive this. He was rushed to the hospital and had to stay in the hospital, but he did live. And at this point, police started thinking that something weird was going on with Judy and all of her bad luck. And this poor man who's now been hospitalized 2 times in the last year, they're like, this is kind of fishy. And especially a car bomb, that's obviously not an accident. That's not something that just happens. So they decide to look into it further. So while John Gentry is still in the hospital for the car bombing, police are looking further into Judy, and they realize that she is the sole beneficiary for a huge life insurance on John Gentry. And they say, like, okay, something is definitely going on here. So they start talking to John Gentry, and he's telling them all of the things about her past that she has told him, like her many PhDs and her tour of duty. And they are saying none of that is true. We've been looking into her, and she definitely has no PhDs and has not been in the Army in any way. And they also inform him about the life insurance policy. And it turns out John Gentry did know that she had a life insurance policy out on him. She had gone with him and set it up. But she had gone back without him and raised it a whole bunch and just paid the premiums herself and not told him about it. So it was way higher than he had realized. And as it turns out, he was getting in his car that day to go to the liquor store to get some champagne because he wanted to celebrate because Judy had told him that she was pregnant with their child. Unfortunately, during all of his learning of Judy's background, he learned that she was actually medically sterilized in 1975 and she was not pregnant. She was lying to him about that, probably just trying to get him into the car where she had put a bomb. He was also informed that Judy had recently purchased cruise tickets to go on a cruise for herself and two of her children, for herself and her 2 children, James and Kimberly, but she had not bought one for John. She was not planning for him to go on this trip with her. And as it turns out, Judy had been telling her friends that her boyfriend, just mine went blank for a second. Judy had been telling all of her friends that her boyfriend, John Gentry, had a terminal illness and that he was going to die soon because of his sickness, which was not true. He was sick for a little bit from the vitamins, but he got over that and he was fine. So that's kind of scary to hear that your significant other is telling people that you're about to die, and that she's planning a trip with herself and all her family without you. In 1983, police searched Judy's home where they found wire and tape that matched the kind that had made the car bomb that was found in John Gentry's car. And they also arrested her son James for the possession of marijuana and also for having a sawed-off shotgun, which is terrifying. And then later that year, Judy was arrested while she was in her beauty shop for the attempted murder of John Gentry. And she actually posted bail for this, but then she was arrested again for the murder of her son and for grand theft from all of her insurance schemes. In 1984, 4 bodies were exhumed because of Judy Buenoano's case. One was of a previous boyfriend named Gerald, and that one turned out to be inconclusive, so there was no charges filed or any trials on that one. But the other 3, Bobby Joe Morris, Michael Buenoano, and James Goodyear Sr., they found arsenic in all 3 of those bodies, and Judy was taken to trial for Michael's murder first. And this trial only took 9 days before she was convicted of murder, and she was sentenced to life for murdering her son Michael. Then, after that, Judy was taken to trial for John Gentry's attempted murder, and this trial only took 3 days, and it only took 2 hours for the jury to deliberate and come back and say that she was guilty. And for this, she was sentenced to 12 years, which was to be served consecutively with her life sentence. So she's stuck in jail. And then the next year, in 1985, Judy was tried for James Goodyear Sr.'s murder. And from this trial, she was sentenced to death. And in Florida, they do still have capital punishment, and they did at the time. So she was sentenced to death for the murder of James Goodyear Sr. She did try to appeal this one, and Colorado authorities actually had it ready for if her appeal went through from that one, they were going to try her in Colorado for the murder of Bobby Joe Morris and sentence her to death from that. But the appeal did not go through, so none of that was necessary, and she was never actually tried for the murder of Bobby Joe Morris. And then in March of 1998, Judy Buenoano was served broccoli, asparagus, strawberries, and hot tea, and then she was executed by electric chair. And I'm fairly certain she was the last female in Florida to be executed by electric chair, because the next person that was executed in Florida, or the next woman that was executed in Florida, was Eileen Wuornos, and she was given the choice of lethal injection or electric chair, because at this time lethal injection wasn't available, I guess. And I believe after her it was, and she was the last one. Fun fact, I guess. Not really very fun fact, but a fact. So that one is pretty rough. I mean, this woman killed everyone that she was close to, or you would think that she was close to. I guess it's hard to say. She, psychiatrist said that she basically just saw people as objects to be used, and she wanted money, and she wanted to own a beauty shop, so she found her way to do that. And she never was remorseful or really apologetic about it, and one of them was her own son. I don't know. I have a pretty tough time with that. With this one, with ones like this where it's people that you're close to. I mean, obviously killing someone that you're not close to is horrible too, but you know what I mean, right? Anyway, let me know what you think about this one. Leave me your comments if you know something that I don't know about it. Let me know. If I got something wrong, let me know. I don't know, just let me know what you think. If you think of something else that you would like to hear me talk about it, I'd love to hear that too. Thanks so much for joining me. I hope you enjoyed learning about this horribly interesting story as much as I did. I'll see you again later with another one. Bye-bye.